Joining.
And Lisa Bataska with Canine Defined.
And Nancy will be joining us here momentarily. She was a little late leaving a function today, so she'll be on in just a minute. So, talking about how to support your dog tonight. I don't know about you guys, but I really wanted to kind of focus on this because I've seen a lot of both pet and sport dogs um, being rehomed lately uh, because they're not. I hate to say they're not perfect, but right, they are taking a little bit of extra support and time, and so it seems to me there's a lot of folks out there, and I don't know if it was COVID, but to me it seems much more prominent now than it ever has before, where people just are not being patient and they're not offering, the support that a dog needs to kind of get through some situations to make things better. So I don't know, Lisa, I know you do a lot in the rescue world. Have you seen a lot of the same, going into the shelters and such?
Yeah, as a rule of thumb, in rescue, generally you see any dogs that are between 5 months and 3 years that are being, returned and or turned in and stuff for because they're having specific behavior issues. And I don't know what the societal trend is, but it just seems like if it doesn't come easy, it's not worth it. And I don't understand it because to me, like you, it's like it's a relationship we get into when we take a dog on. And, even if that dog is not exactly what I have hoped for, I've accepted a commitment to that dog. So I try to do best by the dog first and foremost. But yeah, I've seen it too. And I think a lot of times people are looking for quick fixes. Today, I just did a private with a 10-month-old golden retriever, and she's a bit worried, and they want to be able to walk in the neighborhood, and so she's very concerned and she's fearful about it. And so we talked about it and how to support it. Because again, techniques are techniques, but you have to know the why to understand how. And so what was really refreshing was that they want to work through it. Like they are putting the effort forth, and they want to understand why, so they can feel better about how to get her through this stage of her life. But they also are a younger couple, and they have I think he's got to be about 6 or 7 year old child as well. So they're starting their journey, their lives together. So that's always promising as well.
Yep. And I think doing the rescue world and things like that as well, right? When you have something that's like pretty severe fear, like that, and let's just say, my family and I go for walks every day, and it's really important. We need a dog. I get that. That's more so like, we tried, we worked on a little while, and we really, this is part of our family. We don't want the dog to be miserable. So if you're gonna rehome a dog for that, if it's a recent rescue or something like that, I'm much more understanding of like, this is our life, and we don't want to make the dog miserable because we're not going to change ourselves. Right. Is different to me than well, my dog's scared of my stairs, and it's been a day and a half, and so I'm going to send him back. Right. So I think the thing that hurts my heart even more, though, is when we get into the sporting world, right? And I'm sure everybody out there has seen it once or twice, right? The dog takes the wrong jump, or doesn't get a good discrimination and agility, sits crooked in obedience, doesn't find the hide, whatever it is, right? And you see people walk away sometimes like, oh, God, right? And they just get so upset with something that's a game. And I think we have to remember, right? Dogs don't sign up to play the game. So, just throwing out a personal story, I took in Fire, the border collie, 3 years ago, almost now. And she had no confidence, right? She really was very worried about, was I right? And can I do this? And I don't want to work away from you, and all of these things. And never getting mad when she was wrong and just figuring out, taking a step back and saying, okay, that was not successful. What can I do to make it more clear to the dog? What can I do to help her through? Or, she's very, very sound sensitive, right? If I get upset by that because we're in a competition, I might as well throw that search away. Because as soon as I join her on that journey of like, oh gosh, look at now we're not going to get there, right? If there was ever a chance of recovery, she's now shut down. Mm-hmm. And I think that example you can send out everywhere, right? As soon as you get upset with something that the dog's trying to work through, or maybe it's fear, maybe it's something physical, right? As soon as you start to get super discouraged about that and you show it to the dog, I think we absolutely start to shut them down, right? They stop trying for us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember early in my career when I first started getting involved in agility, and I had Max, my Papillon, my very large Papillon, and doing agility, because I was still new and learning and understanding things, if he went like, I inadvertently taught him to like, when you see yellow, jump off it, because I never really trained that contact behavior because I was too excited to just play the game. And so I remember he'd jump off and I'm like, oh, and I would literally do that. And then the next thing he would do is zoomies in the ring. And then I get upset even more, And so, when you learn and understand it, and I realized my behavior was contributing and making it worse. So, I got better about that. And then now I'm like, well, something to work on. And, I look at it that way now versus, oh my gosh, something didn't happen, or, my dog was wrong. And I think that's the mentality that I think you're talking about. It's like, it's not always about the dog, because we interfere in that. We're part of that communication process. And if we're not clear, that definitely is something that needs to be considered.
Yeah,
it's not just the dog.
Yeah, and so I think even breaking that down a little farther, and I know we have a lot of the same core values, right? So I hear it a lot in behavior training, right? The buzzwords: stubborn, mm-hmm. No focus, no, attention span of a gnat, all of those types of things. What are the other phrases you hear, Lisa?
Obstinate.
Defiant. Defiant. Yep.
Defiant, that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's, and I think, a lot of times, but it's easy to point blame, right? Versus say, sure. Why? And I think, I don't know if it's the society or what, but, and maybe, things kind of circle back around or whatever. But I remember at the beginning of my training career, I heard a lot of that. And then it kind of went away for a bit and then it seems like it's reappeared again. And I'm like, why? I don't understand it, but it's interesting for sure. So I think when you go in, you look at the dog and you start figuring out what's happening. Is there a physical issue? Is there something else going on? And observing the dog to determine what that dog's needs are to help the people understand what's going on. And then once you help the people understand, and it's almost like, I want to say anthropomorphize it, but just humanize the dog for some, you know what I mean? To say, if this were a person having this issue, right? And so, for this particular example, for the dog that I was talking about before, I explained to him, I go, when you have a dog who is not entirely 100% stable, and what I consider stable is you can take them anywhere, nothing bothers them, they're go with the flow kind of dog, they'll listen to you and so forth. To me, that's kind of a stable dog, all around stable dog. Now, desirable or not depends on what you want out of a dog. But in this particular case with this dog, she was pretty worried. And so, and she would do a lot of licking and appeasement behaviors coming up to you when she sees people. When I first walked in the house, she was barking and stuff like that at the gate. And I'm like, don't allow her to rehearse that. She's 10 months old. She's burning new neural pathways. This is not one you want to have stick. So we talked about options and stuff like that. And then as we got into it, they were open to listening. Why is this happening? And I think that's really important. Like, I'm sorry, but, techniques are techniques. Hey, Nance.
Hey.
Techniques are techniques in terms of training, But again, it all goes back to who, like, I can get a dog to do a lot of things, but just because I can do that doesn't mean it's necessarily fair to the dog, right? So I think there's an issue with goals and trying to determine, like, where do you guys match? What's your end goal? And is this really the right situation for this dog? And then you kind of peel apart whether or not they're interested in making that change, or if they just want a quick fix. Because I'm not your person if you want a quick fix. Sorry, it's just not me. So
well, I don't think there's many things that have a quick fix, right? So I'm laughing internally because my students actually got me that shirt for Christmas. It says just because you can doesn't mean you should. Which it's so true, right? We could train a lot of things, but this gets back to kind of the heart of the conversation, right? Which is it's not always your goal that's the end goal. There's a second piece of there that you really have to include in the conversation. So no matter what it is, no matter if your dog's off sniffing something and they're blowing you off, right? Or Vicky says dogs mirror our emotions. It's like looking in a mirror, learning impulse control. And her Jack Russell's learning to rebalance herself thanks to a great trainer training her. Sometimes I think that's true in a lot of cases. I was actually just talking to Nancy a little bit ago about guess who, the Doberman. And he definitely does not mirror my emotions.
No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't actually care what I think for the most part, right? And I'll tell you guys, it is frustrating beyond belief. I have gotten frustrated with him, and sometimes I have just put him away. But he makes me so mad sometimes that I am not in the right frame of mind, and so we both have to walk away because nothing good is going to come of that. And like I can't support you through that because you're ticking me off. And it does feel like he's like, I don't care what you think, right? So sometimes you don't always have to be the one to pick up the pieces, right? But you do have to be the one to say, nope, not today. Right.
And because it's sometimes, and I don't know if you guys, well, I'm a little late, but one of the things it's what is I guess the dog's needs, or what are they telling us they're needing or not needing or doing or can't do, is really, and that's what's hard, because, and this is the challenging part, right? It's an easy fix. It doesn't require you to learn how to read your dogs, or it doesn't require you to understand your dogs. It doesn't require, and which is a lot of work to be able to do that. So, and usually, like Joanne mentioned about blowing you off or whatever, you want to know why is that happening? Why is that dog? Always look at it from a why perspective. Why is it happening? And sometimes the answer is not what you think all the time. And let the dog tell you what's taking him off balance, or putting him back in balance too, right? That's good information that you to know. And a lot of times because I think you guys are talking about the other, like forcing him to do stuff, but sometimes a dog's not telling us anything's bothering us, but we think it is, right? It's like, no, that's not what's happening there. But we actually add in a lot of stuff that really isn't happening. So sometimes looking at it objectively is hard, because you're attached, you love the dog or you love that animal, and you want to make sure that you're doing right by the dog. But unfortunately, sometimes you're coming up with it because it bothers you, not so much bothers the dog. So always being clear on who's being affected the most is really, really helpful, but difficult for sure.
Yes. And if it is your dog that's being affected, this is just came up because it was a memory that came up in my head. So if your dog is the one being affected and they're in the middle of that emotional state, right? Sometimes that's not the time or place to work on that. You file that away, you come back to it. So I had an example. It was a reactive dog, and he was in a crate at an agility trial, and you know those dogs, I have one of those that walk by and cause other dogs to be like blah, 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 right? And so, you know, the dog got set off by big high energy dogs and big fluffy dogs and other things, right? And so the dog's covered, and she's trying to do her best to minimize all of this, right? And so the dog comes out, has a moment, rah, 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 at another dog. So she packs up and she's getting ready to take the dog to the car, right? And another person that was there is like, no, don't put him away. You need to work on that, right? And so I get it. You do need to work on that. But the agility trial where there's, 100 dogs there and there's no escape, that's not the place to train that, right?
Right.
That's not offering support to the dog. That is trying to appease yourself to say, well, I'm going to fix this problem today.
Well,
right?
And I think too, the other point of this is like, you have to go with how you feel. If your gut's like, man, this is not okay right now, go with it. Even if
right.
somebody else who is, been in experience or whatever says you should work on that, because I think a lot of times we do get pressured, peer pressure as well, right? Like my dog's not great at this or that or whatever. I mean, and I think sometimes people give well-meaning but bad advice that's not appropriate for that particular situation or that individual. Because I've too, people are like, oh, you should do that. I'm like, I don't feel like it. Bye. And I just go. I'm like, I'm just not doing it because I'm not in the frame of mind. And I know my energy and you have to be really present when you are trying to affect that. And if you're not, you have to, be like, no, this is not the time or place, like you said.
So I love that so much, because I want you to mirror exactly what just came out of Lisa's mouth and pretend she's your dog, right? Nope, not doing that right now. See ya, I'm out, right? Mm-hmm. But when the dog does it, we somehow put a different connotation to it.
Right. Well, we do that with people too, right?
Right.
They don't want to. They're like, oh, they're just this or that, the other. And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's just they're not able to deal with it at that moment in time. And with dogs, giving them the support they need. And sometimes, there's two extremes, I think. People that are like, just deal with it and suck it up. And there are other people that are like, oh my God, the wind blew too hard. It's very upsetting. It's got to. So you see what I mean? The right answer is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
Yeah, because we have people of the same. It's like, oh my God, I think, this is going to be a problem. Well, wait till the dog tells you it's a problem. Because a lot of times it's not a problem. It's just the dog needs a minute, or they didn't even notice it, right? So it's a very interesting, and some people are like, they just got to deal with it. Well, and sometimes, depending on the situation, sometimes they do have to deal with it if they have to go to the bed or whatever. However, not always, right? They need sometimes the dogs will let us know, and that's kind of what we want to get across. It's like the dogs will tell us what's a problem, what's not a problem, and if they can handle it or not. Because I think there's a school of thought that, well, we don't want the dog to have any kind of bad experience ever. It's like, well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Because I just don't know any animal that hasn't had a bad experience, be it big or small, right? It's just what it is, right?
Well, the other day I was going to say was, the other day, and Joanne doesn't know this, but yesterday I was over at For Your Canine and we're doing a workshop, and we do this workshop, and it's really it's a challenging workshop. and it's because it's reactive, excitable dogs. Well, and everybody's kind of in the same boat. And then, we asked everybody to crate the dogs. And then, I don't know, I've never crated my dog. And that could be a whole nother live if you haven't already done it. But anyway, so, right. It was really challenging because the dogs had to be in a crate and cope. And then you could see some of the panic on the people's faces because they're like, well, I've never done that before. And I'm like, well, okay. I mean, relax and all that. And so Nancy came in and helped with, she was explaining it to them as well as going back and reinforcing the dogs being quiet. And eventually they settled. But I think a lot of times too, we're in a rush to get to our goal. And you know what? It's not our time. It's not on our time. If I go into a training situation, any situation, right? I'll take my dog out, and my first thing is, like Suzanne says, how you doing? How's this going for you? Right? All that stuff. Can we do this? Is this all right for you? How about this? So when I'll take a dog into a new environment, my first step is I'm stationary and I watch my dog to see what their body language is telling me, how I can support it. Can you take a cookie? Because that's going to tell me as far as their level of concern. Because if they're not eating, that's a problem, right? Because then you have some leverage. Is this based upon their concern, or is this based upon the fact that it's overstimulating, or too much information? And I think a lot of times, like if a dog doesn't eat a cookie, it could be just, hey, I want to sniff stuff. So I had this little doodle that we took downtown and was working on it. And she's normally pretty nervous. Like she's a nervous little girl, but we've been working on stuff, building whatever. And she's like, I was like, hey, can you take a cookie? She's like, no, I want to sniff stuff. I'm like, all right, sniff stuff. And when you're ready, I'll see if I'll check in again. So I let her move around and sniff stuff. Was she pulling me? Yes. But that wasn't the point. The point was to try to work that attention and focus in a new situation. And then after a bit, she's like, okay, I'm done sniffing the flowers. I'm sniffing this. Okay, what are we talking about now? So I think a lot of times we just have this timeline on them as well. And it's not fair. It's not fair that we push them because our class is from this time to this time, you have to accomplish this much, right? And I think that's also a pressure that people don't pay attention to. But going back to that, after a while, and it was you pull the dogs out, you work them a little bit, and it's a little chaotic. And I'm like, guys, roll with it. Go with the flow because, it's got to happen on their time, period. And be patient. And if it's too much, if the dog can't recover, well, then we'll be like, you know what, this one needs to take a little break. But it's always very challenging at first because it's so much craziness at one time. But then it gets better and better. And I really like the end result. Sometimes I worry as an instructor because I don't know about you. I always worry still that like, my fear has always been, do you guys understand what's happening here, right? Because you want to convey the information, and I take it very seriously. Like I want people to understand who their dog is, because sometimes we see different things. It's too close to be, you're too close to the forest to see the trees, so to speak. And I think it's really important that as instructors that we're able to help people recognize what is providing that response or what's behind it. So
the why is the dog behaving this way? And yes, it was quite a challenging little workshop. And it's like, and we, the challenge for us, like this is probably part of last week's thing. It's like why people aren't crate training their dogs. It's just mind blowing. I don't understand it. And I can go on a whole rant about that, but it's like, cause it's so unfair to the dogs, right? Cause they could have had, and to be fair, Lisa did a great job. Towards the end, they really had the results were wonderful. The dogs did really well. Everybody was very happy. I even got an email from, how happy they were. And because it was a difficult situation, but that was a really good example of what the dogs were telling us, and if it was a problem. And one of the issues, and this is just a aside, one of the issues was the dog would bark, they'd get up and go and check it. Yeah. Everybody was doing that. I go, okay. So of course that only made the barking way worse, because every time they bark that they get up to check, and it's like, don't get up and check. I will make sure I pay the dogs for being quiet. And when that stopped, the dogs were like, okay. But it was very interesting. Yeah, it was, we do have a video of it, but it was like, yep, they barked and the owner got up and went over, and then the dog was like, okay. They went back away, sat down, and it was just, it's like, oh look, the dogs were actually started the training session, and not the people. So it was a very Very interesting. And I think, and going back to the crate situation, why is every dog that had a crate issue wasn't for the same reason, right? The issue with the crate wasn't the same for every dog. Some of them were a little overstimulated by the dogs. Some of them had a little problem with the being confined. Some of them had problems with being away from their owner. The reasons were different. So you cannot treat all those dogs the same way with the same, because once the dogs were getting paid, depending on what the problem was, they were able to settle or handle it a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun. Fun to say the least.
Yeah. So one other thing to mention, because I know Lisa was talking about it earlier, which was I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's the new hot thing on Facebook right now, because the study came out about it, right? That was talking about walking your dogs and how letting them sniff helps bring down their blood pressure, which was really interesting. I don't remember, were they from Denmark or anyway, I'm not sure which. Yeah. So it was really interesting. They basically, they put monitors on the dogs, and they said, when a dog starts to get a little anxious, nervous, even excited about something, they self-regulate by either shaking off or by sniffing. And they're doing it all by themselves. They're trying to manage themselves. Mm-hmm. So the sniffing thing really sort of got me, because when you let your dog out and give them a minute, right, that is one way to support them, say in a new environment or in a stressful environment. But we were just trained for so long, like, don't let them do that. That means that they're blowing you off. That means that, they're disengaging from you. And so think about things like that. It's what they do, right? If you let the dog go be a dog, what's the first thing most of them are going to do? Sniff something or pee on it, right? I mean, don't let them pee on things. That's not a way to support your dog. But if they want to come out of their crate, do a stretch and sniff around the floor, sniff around the crates, right? As long as they're not bothering anybody else, what's so wrong with that?
Right.
Yeah. So they can handle that. So they can calm down in that situation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Give them a minute to kind of deal. Yeah.
Well, us too, right? We need that sometimes.
It's like, let me have a minute to absorb this. Yeah. I think too, but I also think it's, again, right, when depending on the type of training that's out there, it's more of a drill sergeant type of thing. It's your turn, do this, do this, do this. And I think that doesn't help dogs. I think it actually can, depending on who the dog is and their temperament or their personality traits, it can actually make things a little more worse, right? It's like, oh, I don't have a minute, I just have to do. And so I think in a way you get into a suppressing behavior, and then everyone feels pressure. But I also do think a lot of it has to be, the tone is set by your instructor, right? Who's running the classes big time. So if you're freaking out, that dog's out of control and da-da-da-da and this and that. And then most people, they're like, oh, my dog's out of control and I don't want to disrupt the class. I hear that often. And I'm like, you're not. You're here to learn too. And I would tell you, if your dog is, if I feel this is too much for your dog, I'm like, that's too much, I would excuse you or say, we need to talk offline from this specific situation.
And we actually had that incident yesterday.
Yep.
We had a dog come in. I'm like, yep, this isn't going to work for this dog. So we ended up asking them to come back when it was a little calmer and more relaxed, so the dog can, because I knew the dog wasn't going to be able to deal with it. And they were very wonderful, and they did come back a little bit later, and Lisa saw them, and we were able to better assess the dog and his issue, and it was great. So that was important, because that dog would have never been able to deal with the climate at that time. Would have needed a little drink afterwards or before, during. So it's going to be a little hard for it. So,
but it's so important too, right? And I think the world of at least human beings is changing, right? So when you talk about behavioral medication and therapy and things like that, it's becoming much, much more commonplace. There's not that horrible stigma around it like there was 10 years ago, right?
Right.
So, for the dogs, if it doesn't work for you, I even hear it with experienced handlers who have, you know, had dogs forever and they're like, oh, I'm just so embarrassed. Why? Right? You're here to learn. Hey, come here.
Like right now, are you embarrassed? Right now?
No.
He's the border collie hurt herself, and the foster dog is like, get away from her. Anyway, so no, I'm not embarrassed. I don't want anyone to die.
Yeah.
No, so but right, so I feel like it's hard sometimes to put yourself on display, right? When you have that not like everybody else dog, or you know, they're out of control, or they're whatever you want to call it, right? But again, if you trust your instructor, you maybe have a conversation with them ahead of time to say, hey, you know, I'm feeling a little nervous about this. I don't know if it's going to be good. Can you keep a special eye and let me know if you don't think you can see that yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the thing is, so one of the things that you, guys, and I think we have already said it, right? You need to understand, know what things may or may not worry your dogs, and also depending on, have you been working on X problem, like say if your dog is worried about other dogs or whatever, have you worked on it? And you need to also know where your dog is in that journey of trying to resolve that problem, right? Because that's another issue, right? The dog you may have that had that issue maybe a year or two ago isn't going to be the same dog, and that's where the support becomes a little skewed, right? Yes, maybe a year or two ago they needed to get out of the situation, or they needed to move away or whatever, and in this time, and now they're able to deal with a little bit more, and you're not giving them that opportunity. You're still operating in that, oh, he's afraid of X, Y, or Z, instead of, is he better, is he past it? Because we change over time, so do they. And if you tend to be, you know, I have a client that says, well, I'm an anxious person, and they also have an anxious dog. So those, if you have that situation, you need to check yourself. Is this a concern for me, or is this a concern for the dog? And then you need to be honest with that answer, so that then you know what to do to help the dog. So for example, if a dog is worried about, I don't know, barking dogs, and has been and now and still can't handle, and the dog is like, I don't want to go in there, I don't want to do that, I don't want to work on that, then yeah, getting them out of there or doing something else is fair, right? Versus a dog that maybe that was 2 years ago, and now this year he's like, well, I don't love it, but I can handle it better. So you need to meet with the dog where it is, instead of where it was. And I think that's a big problem that we, you know, if you're paying an instructor, or you're going to class, or you're doing all this work, and you're paying all this money to improve whatever behavior issue, you should be able to then make sure you keep up where your dog is moving along too, so that you're not operating on the, oh, he's afraid of this, and he was so afraid of it 2 years ago, and now it's not such a problem, but you're making it more of a problem. So again, asking the dog, how is this for you? Suzanne's elemental question. Does this work for you? Are you okay with this? How about this? And you want to ask it a lot throughout a training session, or wherever you're going, or wherever you are. You want to ask it every single time. You're just not going to ask it once when you first get there, and then that's it. You're going to ask it the whole time you're there, right?
Yep. I have a before you comment, because it's going to take people a minute to answer the question. So I have a poll question that I would really like to see some of you guys answer, if you don't mind.
Go.
Let's say fill in the blank sport is your most favorite sport ever, right? And it's something that you really, really enjoy to do with your dogs, and you get a dog and that's not the right thing for them, right? What do you do? And there's no wrong answer. I'm just very curious. Like, what would you do? Would you let them be a couch dog? Would you explore something else? Would you return the dog? Would you, you know, anyway, I would just like to hear some of the answers, just to see what it would be. So anyway, what were you going to say, Lisa? Sorry.
So you can go ahead and hold on. You can
Yeah.
answer that question while Lisa's chatting here. We'll see
Right.
what we get.
Who's answering what? Oh, yeah. Okay, got it.
They're
Never mind.
putting it in the chat. Yeah.
Sorry, not following. No, I think the other part that's important to understand is like we always go back to the why to figure out how. And the depending on where your dog is in their growth development also can affect it, right? So like Nancy was saying there, if they're fearful of, let's say I had a client whose dog was fearful of a vacuum cleaner, and then they almost made it a thing by constantly working it. And then the dog's like, why do you want me to look at that thing? That's kind of crazy. It creeps me out. And so then I said, put it away and leave it alone for a bit. And then the next time you pull it out, set it out and just walk past it like it's always been there. Nothing's happened with it. And don't treat it as a training session. And the dog's like, okay, we're good. So, I think sometimes too, and then we have a tendency to like overthink and overwork it. And, you have to be really careful. You do have to check yourself quite a bit. So anyway, I see people are responding.
Yeah. So everybody in this group is trying something else, which is, I'm going to be honest, as a person that I'm very passionate about nose work. I love it. As passionate as I used to be about agility. And I know I mentioned it to Joanne and Lisa. I was like, I miss agility quite a lot, but the current dogs I have really are not able to compete in it. And I also don't have time, but that's a whole nother problem. But I miss not having an agility dog. I miss doing it. But luckily I found nose work, which I love even more, I think. And my dogs love it too, so it's easier. But yeah, sometimes it's hard when you like the sport and the dog's really not crazy about it. But you know what? Like I think I told somebody, I was talking to a student about that. And I go, maybe this isn't your thing. I go, maybe this is happening because maybe you need to be on another path with your dog. Maybe there's opportunities along that path that maybe you need to explore or the universe wants you to check out. Which helped her kind of come to peace with that because they really loved that particular sport that dog was not going to be able to do. So it's something to think about, right? Sometimes the dogs put you on a path to something else, right? Who would have thought many years ago when I got adopted Bandit that I would end up here today?
Right.
Right. He was a busy little dog. He needed a job. He was a pain in the neck. So we found agility and he did agility. He loved it. And we found that sport but it turned into a profession for me and a whole thing just because that little dog was in my wheelhouse. Right. and I needed to keep him busy. And that's what I mean. Sometimes, sometimes they're the things happen to put you on a different path to get maybe somewhere else where you need to be with your dog.
Yeah, I love Connie's answer. I get another dog for the sport I love, but dog number one didn't love. That's how she has two different dog breeds. I'm just curious, Connie, did you originally have two dog breeds or did you get a different breed to go to the sport that your first dog didn't like? That would be very interesting to me, right? Like, I love that answer.
Yeah.
So she has Lapland and the
Lab Hunts and Border Collies. Yeah. So.
Interesting combination of dogs, but
yeah,
they're both pretty cool and drivey dogs. So yeah, I got that.
Yep. And and Amy basically said, she had a dog who liked agility but didn't do great at trials. She got super stressed, so now she just does class. That's hard when it's a sport you love, but I guess in the end, right, you still get to play the sport you love. You're just not doing it at a big trial.
Right.
Happy school.
Yeah, no. Yeah, Jen, right? Nose work is pretty cool. It's in a different way. And yeah, it's hard when you love a sport and the dog really isn't digging it. But we've all been there at some point. But again, sometimes it's because you need to be, for some reason, you need to be on a different path for whatever reason that is, right? You just have to figure it out and follow it and see what you get, what it turns up to be. Yeah, right, Ronnie. Your dog's really and sometimes if it's so easy too when the dog loves what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Like it's not hard. If the dog enjoys the sport, it's a piece of cake. If you
Right.
are really forcing it, it's not as, it's not as enjoyable for all involved, right? And so it's one of those things you really want to um, think about what we're asking. And yes, sometimes it means giving up something that you love, but they're putting you on another, there's a reason why you're going to another space or another path or another sport. I turned out like for me, right? I love agility and I enjoyed agility very much and I miss it, but I'm also loving nose work as well. So it's fun. So one of the things that the other thing, and it just comes to mind because sometimes when the dog has an issue, we really, like Lisa pointed out, we highlight it. We come in, oh, my dog has this. Oh, my dog has that. We make it a bigger deal than it needs to be. So this is one of the things where supporting your dog, if you highlight, like, oh, look, there's a bug over there, and somebody points something out, sometimes you're just going to keep focusing on it. And sometimes, so that's not helping your dog, right? So you want to think about what you're focusing on in a given situation is going to help, because our dogs feed off of that. If you're looking at, oh my God, there's a big German Shepherd over there that I'm afraid of, the dog's gonna be like, oh my God, there is, and you're worried about it, and then everybody's worried about it instead of just because it could have been just not a big deal. You look at it, you can turn away. It doesn't mean that you're reckless. You want to be aware of your surroundings, but it's what you're focusing on that makes the can make a big problem or a little problem, right? You can acknowledge.
And this is where,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. And then this is where like your stimulus gradient comes in, right? So duration, distance, intensity of stimulus in terms of that, and watching the dog. Can I move towards this stimulus, or is this too much? Are they functional? Are they not? And I think what I think happens is, again, we don't slice it thin enough for our dogs to be able to take in the information because we're too worried about getting to the end goal. And nothing in life happens like that, right? Relationships aren't like that. A relationship that's like that to get to the end goal is called a one-night stand. So, and it doesn't usually last. So what we want to be able to read that, understand it. And like for this one little pup, and she's a nervous girl. She's energetic, but she's also not super confident. And she'll fixate on. So the one day I had her in the house and we were working on just seeing if she could settle, but then all of a sudden, and she's like 7 or 8 months going through something sensitive, where all of a sudden the fan caught her eye and she couldn't recover. And she's like, I got to get out of here. So I didn't force her because, one, how am I going to work with that? So then we moved to another place. And then she's like, well, it's still over there. Then she started looking around to see if there was one in the place she was at. And so then I was like, all right, well, I'm here. I'm hanging out with you. And then finally she's like, okay, I think I'm safe. And then I was able to do some work with her. But if she couldn't recover, there's no way that I would force that. I mean, flooding doesn't work. It just doesn't. Not in that situation. Yeah, right. And not in that situation.
Yeah, none of us are willing to take that risk. But so it's so interesting. Like you guys, I mean, a lot of you have followed us for a long time, and thank you for that. But we're always seeming to get new people, and so it seems like such an old theory. But when I ask the question, like in beginning obedience classes, people are like, "Oh yeah, I heard that." How many people don't coddle your dog? Right? Yeah. Don't coddle them. They'll get through it. You'll be fine. Right? And it's like, dude. Coddling is one thing. So when I talk coddling, if that was the ceiling fan dog and I'm like, it's okay, honey, don't worry. It's not going to hurt you. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. I promise. Right. Then that behavior, the dog's like, oh my God, I knew it was scary. Now I'm super worried about it. Right. But supporting
You're
your
scared
dog,
too.
yeah, right. Supporting your dog is more so like Lisa says, she sat quietly. She might have a hand on the dog. She might, be kind of gently petting or just sitting quietly with the dog. Like, hey, I got your back. Like whenever you're ready, we can try something else. Right. And if the dog really is panicking and trying to get away, then start over somewhere else. But right. If they're a little stressed, but they're able to handle it and things are not getting worse, right? And you're not pushing things to go farther. Sometimes sitting quietly can give
Yeah.
a lot of progress to a dog, right? But you have to take the time. This was sort of the heart and soul of, I think the topic tonight, right, is supporting your dog. Sometimes it's nothing but a hand on their shoulder.
Yep.
I got your back. Let me know what you need, right? I'm here for you.
Right. Oh, congratulations, Ronnie, on your lead 3. Yay. Uh, anyway, but yes, and that's what I mean. Support. And that's what I mean. Reading your dog, really understanding what your dog is telling you as far as what's bothering them will give you the information to, like, what is causing the issue. It tells you how to handle it. Like Joanne just said, right? If it's just a little worried, while you sit quietly and just be. Sometimes that's all you need. Now, if the dog, like she said, is trying to get away, then yeah, let's do something about that, right? And so you two are super.
It is. I think it's hard on the people more than the dogs, though, sometimes, depending, right, on who the dog is.
Mhm.
But I think your dog probably was pretty happy with the outcome, Susan, from the picture I saw.
Mr. Rambo pass out. Is that what that happened?
Yes.
Yep, like a light.
Yeah.
He was close.
Yeah. And they all did really, yeah. That one was the manners one, and it was more dogs that had more skills. So then we were able to do a little bit more. Like we were able to sit in a group and then have the dogs settle down, and then we would do one at a time coming up, and then eventually by the end we were in a circle, and then the dogs were able to walk around each other with their handler without trying to visit and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So it was pretty cool, but I love seeing that. That keeps me going, truly.
Yeah. Well, and the truth is, so that's a good good information, right? Like, how is this for you? Can you handle that? Can you handle that the dog's going around? Can you handle that? Are you able to, without the people worrying about it? And I know in a workshop or class setting, it's difficult because you're managing, the instructor's managing all the people, but it'd be, and I know more ideas, right? It'd be great to record some of that so you can see how your dog was really handling it. So you really have that information in real time. Because sometimes people are like, oh, he was really stressed out. And when you look at the video, it's like, no, he wasn't. Because remember, that is why they don't use, oh my God, what is that? Where eyewitness accounts, because we never remember the correct things.
Yeah, right.
We never, it's like he was a blonde guy, 6 feet tall with a red hoodie, and it was really a short 5'4" redhead with
wasn't it Dateline where they said they took that? I remember seeing that episode where they talked about it.
Yes.
I was like,
yes,
that's crazy.
They were asking people to describe the culprit, and it was so far off the mark. So that's why. So if you think about it, when we're a little stressed in a challenging environment, we're not going to remember everything the way it really was, right? So you really have to, and sometimes with those, when there's an emotional component to it, because there is an emotional component with your dog, you're going to remember it. There's going to be, especially depending on how it was or how it went, a very emotionally packed response there, right? And then you're going to it's going to be there, oh, he was really afraid and blah blah blah, where it was maybe you were surprised or you were shocked or you were and the dog was like, I don't know. And I'll tell you, this is quite a long time ago. I had a student come, and it was the beginning of class. It was a little chaotic, a lot of barking, and the woman comes in and says, my dog really doesn't like barking. He gets really worried. I look down at the dog, and the dog's like, it's all right. It's good for me. I'm all right. It's all good. And I'm like, because you're hearing what you're being told, but you're also reading the dog, and you're like, okay. I go, and I looked at it again, because we all make mistakes. And then I realized, like, okay, so does it bother you, or is it really bothering the dog? As she looked down at her dog, she goes, okay, it bothers me. I go, okay, we can work on that. Right. Yeah. But the dog was not phased by the situation at all, but it was very chaotic for her. I go, okay, then it's easier for us to make it right for the team, right? For the dog and for the team and for the human and the dog. But if we are thinking it's the dog and that's what they're seeing or they're reading, and it's not really what's happening, it's difficult because it's also in that real time you're telling people, oh, you're wrong, your dog's not, so it's a difficult situation for us to be in too, and we have to be able to help the people see what you're seeing too, right? Because again, they're closer to the project than you are.
Right.
So
yes. And oh, how easy it would be to make barking a bad thing, right? When you're the handler and every time the dogs bark, you cinch up on the leash, or right, you do something to make it worse because you're projecting onto the dog, right? And then you can see how that, and that's where I think sometimes I watched it happen at Doberman Nationals one year, right? And it was the funniest thing. It wasn't funny, it was sad, but I'm sitting in a chair watching, and somebody had a conversation about my old male. And I said, oh, he has no problem with dogs. He likes dogs. I've never had a male Doberman that liked other males. And I was like, well, he didn't have an issue with dogs, right? If somebody's going to start something, okay, but like he doesn't care. And so as I'm watching around the room, what I'm seeing is even from 6-month-old puppies to, adult dogs, it's like the dog's like, hey, what's that? Don't look at that dog, right? And it's like, oh. And you wonder why your dog has issues with other dogs, because every time they look at one, bad things happen, And so it's just be careful about those things, right? Really don't wait till something bad happens if you have a reactive dog. But if you don't, or you're not sure,
Don't make one,
right? Because you could make it pretty easy.
yeah, it does, and it's any breed. You can make it. You
Absolutely.
can take any breed and make it reactive in no time flat. That is, sadly, that's a pretty easy. You can do that in a couple of days.
And the same concept too, right? If the dog's a little nervous, or they need a minute, or any of those things, right? And you make it now this drill sergeant, or you make them do it, or any of these things, you can ruin sports, you can ruin moments and places and people for dogs, right? So I need to make that shirt. Can I just get a minute, right?
Right, because it's and now go, and then on the other side of that coin, if your dog is really is struggling, don't keep him in the situation, and see what you need to do to make it better for the dog. And sometimes, like in yesterday's case, the answer was leaving at that time and place for that particular dog, right? And trying again in another way. And that's another thing. It's like they're just not going to have to deal with it. No, because sometimes then you're going to tie that fear and that emotion to the dog, and that's where you're going to get, you're going to make a lot of other problems. Because sometimes the dog, like Joanna says, needs a minute, and if you given him that minute, you wouldn't have any problems, any behavior problems at all. But since you never gave him a minute and you kept on and kept on and kept on, now you have a problem. You created the problem, right? That's not hard to do. We can do that pretty easily because our dogs, they are in tune to what we want and how we live and what we do, so they care about that a lot. So you want to be clear if it's the dog is having a difficult time, just do what you need to do to make it better, and ask the instructor if they're missing it. Ask the instructor, hey, my dog's having this issue. What can I do, or how can I fix it? Right? Just try to figure it out. Your instructor should be really aware of what's going on with each dog, but sometimes it's depending on the situation and the environment, it might be too tough. But something to think about, right?
And one thing I will say was, Jill, I am very impressed with the fact that you took that information of not allowing her to pull you, and she was able to walk around. So she's a little young golden, right?
Lab.
I'm sorry, lab. Sorry, there was a golden as well. Young lab, and she was all, I want to go here, I want to go here, and so forth. And we just talked about leash handling and tweaked her handling, and the dog's like, oh, I shouldn't do that then. And it made a huge difference. She was able to walk her around, and she was like, all right. And I think sometimes what we do is, I think too, like positive for whatever reason seems to have become its equivalent to permissive, and it's not.
Right.
It's not the same. Like, and I think, people say, oh, don't correct. And I think, I mean, honestly, this is where I go to, like, I believe in a healthy balance of everything. It's about, I don't think that corrections are bad. I think it depends on the dog and what you're trying to accomplish, if it's appropriate.
And what the correction is.
Exactly. Right. Because you can go crazy on a correction and really make things bad. I see a lot of reactive working dogs, like shepherds and stuff like that, because they're placed on prongs immediately. And then, every time they see a dog, you get a correction for, don't look at that dog, don't do anything. And it's almost like they have to wear blinders. And I think that's something else that's kind of crazy. But working on the dog, I remember there was a dog we were working with, and they were trying to pass the CGC test, or the person come up to do the shake the hand. Well, at the location we're training at, the dog was like moving back out of place and growling, so it got a correction. So when the person was next to him, and I went to approach her, or their owner was there, he did the same thing, and she went to correct him. I go, don't you do that. Just walk away. And at the end, he was still leery of me because he had a history of doing that. But at the end, he's like, well, maybe you're not that bad. Right. And I'm like, don't make it worse than it is. I mean, he's not super overly social anyway, but you can make it so much worse. So, but I see that where the wrong tools are put on dogs. Right. And I'm not against the tool. I think it really depends on the individual dog, their resilience level, what the issue actually is, and so forth. But you don't want to go overkill either. So,
right. And that's another way of supporting the dog, right? It's like, okay, this, how's this for you? Oh, okay, it's a little bit worrisome. Then we'll do this. Does this help you? Right? Always asking that question every training thing and everything that you do, especially those of you who have young dogs, right? You have to ask the questions, because if you don't, and the answers will change as your dog goes through adolescence and as they mature. So you need to be looking for the change in those answers before you just apply one size fits all, training technique or correction or whatever, when that might have worked 6 months ago. But now if your puppy was 6 months ago, you would do one thing, but at a year old or a year and a half, you're not going to do the same things, because It's different, because your dogs are changing, because hopefully all of us are different than we were. We're not the same people we were when we were teenagers. At least I hope not.
No.
Yikes. Right. And we, what would work as a correction
as hungry.
What would work as a correction for us when we're 18 or 19 isn't going to be the same as what's going to work now, right?
Yeah. My tolerance level is much lower now. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that you really want to think about what your dog's age and what they're doing, and also what they know. Do they really understand what you're asking? Do they really get it? And you need to, the answer to that is, can they do whatever you're asking here, there, and everywhere? And if they're well versed in that environment, like, can you sit here? Can you sit there? Can you sit everywhere? And if you can, then if I ask you and you don't do it, there's going to be a consequence. Now, if you don't know it that well, I'm like, okay, you got to retrain that, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of people are like, he should know that. Really? And I always ask the question, why should he know that? Have you done this, that, and the other? And the answer a lot of times is no, right? They haven't done everything they need to do to get it. Like, for example, if I didn't want my dog to counter surf, but I really haven't trained it, and it's like, oh, I can't believe she's doing that. Really? How much work have I done to stop that from happening? Not a lot, right? But if I've done a lot of it, then I can ask a little more of her, right? So that's something that you want to consider, right? How much skills does your dog have? Does your dog have enough skills to work on, to do what you're asking in that environment, right?
I just got a text message that asked if my dogs were starting a band, because that's what it sounds like.
You got a drummer already.
Yep. You got a squeaker in back. It's
good times.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Corrections are coming. Stop being so happy.
Corrections are coming. Nice.
Just kidding.
Yeah, no, but it's one of those things you definitely want to ask so in order to support your dog one way or the other, you need to ask the dog, what is this on your radar? What's okay, what's not okay, right? Cowbell. Yes. I would put that band on my poster wall. Yeah, honey. Anyway, so I think uh, I hope this helps you. Again, this is part of our goal for this webinar, for these Facebook Lives, is to help you have a better relationship with your dogs, and this is one of them. So how much support, how to get better at giving it, or allowing them to grow and develop. Remember, pressure, or sometimes dogs need pressure, or we all need pressure to learn and get better, but we don't want to put so much pressure that we're gonna crush
Ruin
that
trust relationship
and
with them.
ruin that relationship. But you definitely
Right.
want to be able to give the dogs the support they need in order to continue to develop that bond between you and your dog. So
Right.
that is kind of, hopefully in a nutshell, what we hopefully you got from tonight. So anyway, thank you all for showing up tonight, and we will see you soon. See you next
Thanks,
week.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.